Thanks. Prynawn da pob, croeso I cyfarfod heddiw. Hello and welcome to Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council's Aspirational Scrutiny Committee on Monday the 30th of June. Please note that this meeting may be recorded and broadcast via the authority's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes. I should say we've got a new member today. Scott Thomas has joined the committee for the first time. Thanks. So the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. We've got 3 apologies. Lisa Mitten sent her apologies, Jill Preston and Michelle Jones. Are there any other apologies? No. Declarations of interest. Has anyone got any declarations of interest?
Yeah, just to say that I am on the Finance Committee of Cyfarthfa Governing Body.
Right, you are, thanks. Yeah, Paul. Yeah.
And similarly then, I'm on Finance then of Penedre and also Gelli Dialogue, and with some of my colleagues here on the School Budget Forum. But I think the same will apply then to anybody who is a school governor, being as the report goes on to say that the majority will be in deficit then in the coming years.
We've all got dispensation to speak and vote, yeah.
Just to say that I'm a school governor as well. I'm not on a finance committee, but yeah, just I'm here as a parent, primary parent school governor.
Yes, I'm also on governing bodies, so therefore I'm concede the various financial statements, etc.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we're all allowed to speak and vote for this. The next item on the agenda is the draft forward work programme. This is the first meeting of the Aspirational Merthyr Tydfil Scrutiny Committee for this new municipal cycle. We presented the forward work programme for discussion and agreement. The draft forward work programme has been developed following a meeting between the chair, vice chair, cabinet member and the members of the committee. The scrutiny members re-emailed the draft forward work programme to make comments or suggestions. The forward work programme is like a fluid document which will be considered at each meeting and is subject to change to take into account emerging issues. A risk workshop is planned for Monday the 22nd of September to look at the service risks, and you'll see gaps in the forward work programme, and the idea is that if we identify potential risks at the risk workshop, these can be added to the scrutiny committee then. Are there any items members would like to consider as part of the 25-26 scrutiny forward work programme? Oh, Natalie?
Thank you. I just wanted to add, I asked some questions on email, which I shared with the committee. When I printed out the answers earlier, I realised only I've been replied to, so nobody else on the committee has seen the responses that I've had. So I'll share those after the meeting and obviously in advance of the service risk meeting that we have in September, so everybody else is aware of the answers.
Thanks. Paul Phillips.
If I can go back on that one, Natalie, being as this is in the public domain, I think that needs to be shared then with the record of this meeting so that we could see then what the response is. But I've got a separate question if I can, Clive. On the report at 3.1, the third bullet, if I could refer you to that, please. Fully understand then what the intention is, the original intention behind having a scrutiny committee. It's just, I just need clarification if I can on that third bullet. Led and owned by independent-minded councils on behalf of the public. Does that mean that people like myself who are co-opted independent, I hope, objective, impartial, but we are not then to make the suggestions, as my colleague Natalie has then, in terms of what needs or what merits then consideration then to come under scrutiny? Or is that just for councillors? Does it also mean read co-opted members?
It should say, really, shouldn't it?
That's what I'm hoping you were going to say, because otherwise it then seems to lend weight then to what the councillors may want us to look at, and doesn't then look to the general public, I think, as being wholly objective and independent then of the political world that some of us don't exist in.
In fact, there's more co-opted members. You're the councillors, really.
Indeed.
So that was a good point, that was, yes.
Thank you.
Natalie?
And sorry, thank
Oh, no,
you. And just one more then. I know we've previously said in scrutiny previous meetings that we'd like to see more about the challenges that the schools are facing, the education director is facing. So I'd like to say thank you to Sue and to the chair, obviously Lisa isn't you, but say thank you for planning in the risk workshop in September. I think it's very much needed, so I just wanted to acknowledge that. Is that being brought about because of the work that Scrutiny do? Is that because we fed that back in the meetings, that that particular session has been planned?
I think it was a mixture, Jane, wasn't it?
The workshops are planned across all our scrutinies, so yeah, it's part of like the...
But the risk one specifically, is that because we've said in scrutiny that we'd like to know that the challenges, obviously the reports that we have, I believe it may be in the last meeting that I asked, I said about the reports that we receive, it's good to know, where we were, where we are, where we're going, but we also want to see what the risks are, what the barriers are, potential barriers to achieving where we want to be. And we said, I think we all kind of agreed that we wanted to see more about what the risks are to us achieving those objectives. So I was wondering, was this particular risk workshop brought in off the back of what we've said in our scrutiny meeting?
Probably a mixture of both. We've got a new director, Sarah King, so she was keen that scrutinies subject or have sight of more data and performance across teams. So yes, mixture of both. So scrutiny and new director has meant that we're having workshops across all our service areas for scrutiny to be part of.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Were there any other comments about the forward work programme? No. So, well, the report recommendation is that members agree the draft forward work programme for the next municipal year. So, do we all agree with the proviso there is gaps that we can fit in additional items? So, yeah, yes, Paul?
With that proviso, that caveat in that, because Natalie has made some sensible suggestions which we previously discussed and we would like. I can see that there is a list of ancillary items which haven't quite made then the diary for the next 12 months. Some of those are quite big. I'm very interested, for example, then in what scrutiny has to say then about the work that's ongoing then at several of our schools, the building work in particular then. So as long as we've got some flexibility in this, Chair, as long as we can say that for the time being, we are content to go with what the initial suggestion is, but that this is a living document and can move, and we can discuss then at each meeting as we have done so far in the past, then yes, I'd be very happy to support it.
Does Natalie?
Same, yeah. I'm happy to support it with the proviso that when we have the risk workshop, that there may be areas we may want to change, because part of the questions that I asked in the email that my fellow committee members haven't seen was about certain things kind of dropping off our off the radar, if you like, with our work plan. So I think for us as a committee to agree what we want the priorities to be. So hopefully the risk workshop will allow us to say then what our priorities as a committee should be, which will then give a new draft version of our forward work plan. So on that basis, I'd accept.
Yes, it should alter every time we have a meeting, really.
Yeah, effectively it should. Thank you.
So, is it Lawrence?
Yes, I just want to echo exactly what Natalie said. That's the situation. Thanks.
Yes, please.
Jeff? Yeah.
On the task and finish groups, nothing's sitting in there, but to my knowledge, there was a task and finish group that I was meant to lead, but more able and talented, and unfortunately we couldn't take it forward before due to the problems we had with industrial action with certain members of staff. But it was said that we were going to take it forward again. So, but it doesn't appear on there, Clive. So could you ask why not, please?
Yes. Yeah, we'll make a note of that and ask about that.
What happened, Jeff, when we had our initial planning meetings, we had to go through a list of prioritisation. So I can add that back in, and that's something that we can pick up in the risk workshop and work out who's going to sit on that task and finish group and when you're going to meet. Yeah, no problem.
So, with all those provisos, then the report recommendation is...
Clive.
Oh,
Sorry, I've had my hand up for a minute or two.
sorry, I can't see you from here. There you are, I can see you now.
Yeah. Just a question. Now with all these gaps in the forward programme, would we have a specific time to have the first report back to the committee? Initial report on that for it to come before committee?
Yes, it's on the 25th of... Oh, it's on the 25th.
Yeah,
of September,
see what I'm
isn't it?
saying is if we decide that we're going to fit something into the gap, would we say we'd need, say, the initial report on what we were saying within the next committee cycle?
Can I come in there, Chair? Councillor Isaac, we would have to have that to allow time for the officers to actually complete the report. So as we move forward now, we will need to fill the gaps in because the officers obviously they need time to pull the information together for scrutiny. So where there are gaps, we do have what's called quarterly technical meetings. Unfortunately, the one that we had has been postponed until September. So we'll take into consideration what Natalie has sent through. Hannah sent through some other information this morning. So we'll have a look at those and then we'll consider in time for the September one, because I don't think there isn't a gap until there's a gap in October. So we really do, for my officers, we really do need to know really this side of the summer holidays, what is going to go on in October to give them the time to pull the reports together. So I'll pick that up with Jane and Lisa moving forward.
Yeah, thanks, because that was my concern, that they wouldn't have time to bring the reports together and it would be wanted earlier than was possible, if you understand what I'm saying.
Oh, Paul?
Thank you. If I can go back to Jane's earlier answer, that was the point of my earliest question as to what topics we then will look at and actually scrutinise. I can't recall us as a group being asked then to decide on the running order then for what's being presented to us in this first scrutiny meeting of the Merthyr Aspirational Committee. And therefore, that's why we were making the points, Natalie and myself, that until such time as we have a chance to consider the risks, then, but all that we can do at the moment in accepting what the proposal is that this is provisional. And I do accept Sue's point entirely, but it does take a long time then for the officers then to come up with their reports. Please do, Sue.
Yeah, what I was also going to say is the reports that you've had today have come today because of their timing that feed into council or cabinet, or in the case of the museum, got to go off to Welsh Government. That's the same for the West report. That's the same for the libraries report. It feeds into a cycle. Some of them feed into a cycle where they have to go to, where they're going to council or they're going to elsewhere. usually Welsh Government. So that's where where we've populated some of them already, because they're feeding on to something else. So Jane will be able to probably highlight those to actually say these are the ones that can't move because of where they're going next. Because if I think the original forward work programme didn't have budget on today, but we wanted to be able to bring budget to Cabinet early in September, which is why there was a change from EHE today. So we've tried to structure it so as they feed into Council or Welsh Government reports.
Thank you for that. That clarifies then some of my questions then that would have come then naturally then, as long as we know that there is a pragmatic approach because there is some issues which are time barred and need to be done, then I understand then why it's there. Thank you.
Are there any more questions or comments? No. No. Oh, well, we were asked to agree the draft forward work programme for the next municipal year. So is everyone in agreement with all the provisos that have been added? Yes. Yes, is everyone in agreement? Yes. Yeah. Oh, so that's okay then. The next item on the agenda is the school's balances and medium-term financial plans. There was a small error in the report. This report is coming to scrutiny prior to going to Cabinet, and it's not going to the full council as was written in the original report. So the Cabinet Member for Education, Councillor Gareth Lewis, is going to introduce the report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. This report provides an update on the level of school balance for financial years 24-25 and 25-26, and also the projected 3-year schools medium-term financial plans. As a result of a better than expected local government settlement for this financial year, the Council set a balanced budget without requiring additional budget reductions from schools. However, budget reductions in schools for the previous 2 years continue to be applied, and this equates to a 6.33 reduction to the individual school's budget. And this has led to ongoing financial pressures for schools. At the end of the 24-25 financial year, schools' balances held in reserves on the 31st of March were £861,000 in surplus, which is a better position than when school budgets were set in May 24, but still represents a 58% reduction in balances year on year and a reduction of circa 1.4% of delegated budgets held in reserve. This reflects a similar challenging picture across schools in Wales. 6 of our schools set a deficit budget in 25-26 and therefore require a planned licence deficit, 4 of which continue from the previous financial year, and 2 of which are new applications for a planned licence deficit. We should note that 19 schools are currently projected to have a deficit budget at some point over the next 3 years within their medium-term financial plans. And indeed, a similar trajectory for school balances is expected across Wales, with an increase in number of schools facing a deficit budget position in the current financial period and beyond. The report also highlights a number of reduced posts in schools as a result of budget reductions, the majority of which are fixed-term contracts with less than 2 years' service, and to date no compulsory redundancies have been undertaken. The local authority aims for all schools to have a sustainable medium-term financial plan that enables appropriate curriculum delivery over the long term to support the delivery of the Raising Aspirations, Raising Standards strategy and demonstrate good resource management. The key measures that the local authorities judge good resource management is outlined in 7.3 of the report. And finally, Chair, I think it's important to note that if further reductions are applied to school budgets in subsequent financial years, this will result in nearly all schools facing significant challenges to set a balanced budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Are there any questions about the report? Perhaps I should say Anthony Lewis is here as well for any difficult questions. Lawrence?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions that I'll ask a couple and then I'll let others perhaps chip in and time allow and perhaps you'll come back to me. First one was relating to 7.1. If you want a chance to, can examples be given of where poor resource management has been identified? Because it's mentioned about good, where we want to be.
Sorry, I didn't.
7.1.
7.1, yeah. Where we want to be. It says last part, support the successful delivery of the RAS strategy and demonstrate good resource management. So therefore there must be poor resource management somewhere. Can I have examples, please?
Is that 7.1?
Yeah.
There are examples of schools which, when we're looking at it, have gone out of contract for various items which we have had to actually look at and sort of undertake reports into what has happened. So we have had examples of where schools have gone outside procurement expectations from the local authority.
So exactly what are we talking about? What extent is that financially compromising?
It has led that particular school into a deficit, and we've had to look at how we actually manage that school. And then, if you, as you know yourself, those of you that are governors, if a school is in a deficit budget, the first cut that actually goes is staffing. So it's led that school to actually make staffing reduction.
Yeah. So are we saying one school or multiple schools?
You asked for an example, and that's an example that I can actually give you. Anthony may have some other examples to.
Yeah, if I can come in there as well, so you can. I didn't quite catch your question, sorry, Lauren. So
yeah.
I think I understand what you're saying now. With regards to 7.1, that is just our strategic aims and aspirations for all schools. It's not necessarily saying that.
Well, it's intimated, isn't it?
No, it's not. It is just a strategic aim and aspiration. So even if it was the case that we had all our schools in that position, that is still a stated strategic aim. And that's standard wording that we've had within the report over a number of years.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Why isn't it a stated aim that the authority wants to be in a position to provide the necessary budget to meet the needs of all the financial demands schools face, such that the staff and pupils achieve their potential?
It is partially covered within that 7.1. The authority's aim is for all schools to have a sustainable, balanced MTFP that enables appropriate curriculum delivery over the long term.
Thank you, Chair. As I said, I'll pass over and I'll come back if you've got time. Thank you.
Oh, yes. So Jeff is next. Yes.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lewis gave a synopsis earlier on that 19 of the 22 schools might be in deficit budget in a few years' time. Anthony's just said he wants a sustainable future. How can that be sustainable if, in fact, you've got 19 of your schools in deficit budget? At some point, that possibly would become all the schools, and even before that point, the amount of deficit might be greater than the amount of credit. Therefore, the education budget would be in all kinds of mess. So where are we on that? And this is just a plan, I get, but what's the planning around that? How do we accommodate that?
I think we're doing this at the moment,
okay.
Jeff. It's a difficult situation. It's not a situation we want to be in. We're one of the few authorities that actually ask our schools to do an MTFP, and the rationale for that is because, as you've seen, that some schools, if they've got that MTFP, they can plan earlier if they know where they're going. But the school, the budget is set on an annual basis, so schools plan for what they think that, so their MTFP is based on what they're getting now. So if that changes, things change. So we look at this on a national basis. Anthony, there was an ADU meeting last week, wasn't there, that actually looked at this, which Anthony perhaps come in. And whilst it's not, this is Merthyr, and what I want and what we all want here is what's best for the schools in Merthyr and for the children and young people in Merthyr. But this is a dialogue and a conversation that's being had across council chambers in Wales. So Anthony, I don't know if there's any feedback from ADU that you could give last week of the position.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. I think there's information that's touched on this in the report 5.4 and 5.5. Shares information, provisional information with the national picture as we had at the time. That information has been updated, so we do have information that is following the closure of accounts across the Welsh authorities. And it's still a stark position. It's not quite as bad as was reported in the report. So where in 5.4 it says 32% of all schools across Wales will be in a deficit budget position as at the financial year end, that's now 27%, which obviously compares to 21% in Merthyr Council. Where it says 12 in 5.5 that there'll be 15 local authorities with at least 20% of their schools in deficit. That's the same. Where it says there's 10 local authorities with at least 30% in deficit. That's the same. Where it says there's 5 local authorities with at least 50% in deficit. That's now 2 with at least 50%. Although there are a further 5 with at least 40% of their schools in deficit. And where it says that there are 12 local authorities with an overall deficit budget across all their schools, which is the thing that Jeff was referring to, the aggregate schools balances being in deficit, that's 8 at the end of the financial year, which compares to, I think, 2 the prior year. So that trajectory is still there, but it shows that the recovery of some of those schools balances in year is similar to what we've seen within the council in Merthyr, because obviously we had set the budget across all our schools, which was showing there to be an overall deficit budget, but we've come in with an £800,000 surplus. In the current year, the budget set by schools at the moment is 1.5 million. So you can see the direction of travel, but that is based on current funding levels, assuming there's no further funding cuts from 26-27 onwards.
Thank you for the explanation, Chair. I see that. You will be aware that some schools will have, once they've removed as much as they can from their budget in a reasonable manner, without affecting that which is delivered to the children, you come to an area that you cannot take any more away, because to do so would be to remove that which Sue says quite rightly that we all want, that is to educate our children in the best way possible. And nobody, I suspect, on this committee can want that situation to occur. So I take the point that you say, Anthony, about this is a national picture. I get that. But we're dealing with Merthyr at this moment in time. And that has to be our priority, accepted that somebody from the national picture might make a decision which helps us, but they also might make a decision that doesn't help us. And with that in mind, can anybody explain to me, please, is the deficit that we have at the moment, is that taken severely into account if and when the council is asked to make further cuts to its budget instead of affecting the education budget? Because it does seem to me, as much as this present administration decided not to touch the budget last time, it seems to me it's ripe for the plucking every time. And so I just need some kind of reassurance, given the fact that we are heading towards 86% of our schools to be in negative territory in 2 or 3 years' time. Yeah, that we're not just going to be picked off left, right and centre. So I get it's difficult, but can I have some kind of reassurance, please?
What I can tell before Gareth comes in is that we have what we call an education risk management meeting, on a half-termly basis, or is it a termly basis, Anthony? They go into one, where we actually look at specific education risks within the corporate management team. This is on the agenda for 2 weeks today, where we will be looking at the position of schools' budgets. We will be looking at medium-term financial planning. So we have put it at the top of that agenda to actually talk at a corporate management team level, which will then feed into Cabinet.
Okay, that's great. Can we have some kind of indication later on from you, sir, that where that thinking is going? Not necessarily decisions or anything like that, because that has to go to Cabinet, I get that. But if this committee can be given some kind of direction of travel, then at least we can raise concerns or say well done, whatever it is, during the case of the oncoming year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to come in there, Jeff, I can't give you an assurance that future monies will be taken from the education bill. It would be wrong of me to give that assurance today. We simply don't know what the local government settlement will be. We will know around December time. We took a choice, it was a political choice, not to take any resources from the school's budget, rather. It was the right choice, but unfortunately schools are still having cuts because of what happened over previous years, unfortunately, Jeff. And unfortunately, again, the short-termism of local government finance doesn't help schools.
No, thank you for that, Gareth. I understand totally. Thank you, Chair.
If you finish, Paul?
Thank you. If I can go back to Anthony, first of all. Anthony, would you know if the average of Welsh schools then facing deficit budgets at 27%, what is the best in class figures? You've told us about the worst in class for 2, which will have 50% of schools then in deficit budgets. What was the best local authority then? Do you have those figures? Deficit, schools in deficit then, percentage-wise.
That's the next exercise for Adu Finance, is to look at the budget positions of school have set in the current financial year and what that's projected to look like.
Okay, so, sorry, I don't think I made myself clear. I'm talking about other LAs. If the Welsh average is 27% of all schools are facing then deficit, there must be some LA that's better than the others.
Absolutely, yes. Sorry, I did provide an update on that, but I'll go back to
best in class is what, please?
15 local authorities have at least 20% of their schools in a budget deficit.
And the one with the least deficit has what? The least number of schools in deficit? Do you know, please?
Least. 3.6%.
3.6%?
Is the least. Every LA has at least one school in the budget deficit. 3.6% is the smallest.
So it ranges from 3.6% at one end to 2 local authorities with half of their schools.
2.8%.
Is there an explanation that you can readily then lay your hands on as to why? Is this some peculiarity of local authority which is much bigger or much smaller than ourselves? But we can't be much smaller than Merthyr because we are the smallest.
Yeah, I'm really not sure of the reasons.
Thank you. It was an unfair question. Thank you.
The local authorities.
My next question then goes to Councillor Lewis, if I may, and that is a question which I think runs through the whole of this because, as you'd expect, with so many of us being school governors, and like yourself, all committed then to providing the best education we can then for the young people of this local authority, is what therefore is your priority? Is that balancing the budgets, or is it then providing the best education that we can within then our tolerance?
No, the priority is to provide the best education we can, in line with the RAS strategy. It's incredibly difficult, Paul. Incredibly difficult. But finances shouldn't be at the expense of a child's education.
Thank you for that. In the report then at 6.3 and elsewhere, we clearly have then note of then the risks which are significant, reduced capacity to be able to deliver early interventions. I've inherited a school that had a deficit budget when I came in as a new governor then two years ago, and in that school, over 24 months, we would have reduced our staffing levels by 34%, and we're now at bare bones, down to the statutory level where we should be. I'm pleased to say that we will be projected to come out of then a deficit position in 2 years' time. These figures are subject then to a planned licence deficit for which the local authority has to agree to. But it just goes to show then the lengths that we need to go to be able to get there. Now, the report makes quite clear then what is planned by way of people like myself, people who are governors, people who are volunteers who are trying to manage the budgets of the schools, where 149 teaching staff then, both teachers and LSAs, would have lost their jobs then between September of 23 and September of 25. Is there a de minimis? Is there a limit as to how far you're prepared to go with this? And therefore, if we can't then balance the budgets, how far are you prepared to go by way of accepting overall deficit budget, even though the best intention is that we all try to balance the books?
Are you talking about deficit budget for schools or the council as a whole?
Schools. I'm talking about,
okay.
Chair.
Okay. It's inevitable that difficult conversations will have been had with finance committee head teachers, and with chairs of governors. I've had those discussions. Paul, no doubt you have as well. When approximately 80% of a school budget is made up of staffing costs, it's incredibly difficult to find what else can be removed when schools are already facing very difficult and serious situation. Unfortunately, Paul. That's all I can say on the matter, I'm afraid. It's incredibly difficult for a number of schools. I've experienced it in the schools I've been governor of. Conversations regarding voluntary redundancies, for example, are not easy discussions to have. But unfortunately, that's the situation we are at the current time.
Okay. Can I ask Sue a question now, please?
Sue,
yes. If you find that governing bodies no longer feel able to deliver balanced budgets then because of the moral dilemma between trying to provide a good education then to the children for which they are responsible for, and also trying to balance the books then, what would the alternative be then if the governors then weren't able then to continue in that role?
Two ways to look at it, aren't there, Paul? If we feel that the governors are not doing their duty, we have the ability to take the budget from a governing body under the powers of the Welsh Government. We can move the monitoring of the budget. That's right, isn't it, Anthony? We can remove but then that puts pressure on central teams because they have to manage. So it's a bit of chicken and egg, isn't it? Which ones you actually want to do. We do work very closely. Anthony's team works very closely with governors, and we have had difficult conversations with chairs of finance where they have not perhaps done everything that we would consider appropriate. And then you have that conversation. Well, you've got that dilemma. We can remove the delegated budget under powers of intervention. It's not something I would want to do, but there is always that there at the end. I would say that all our governing bodies have worked really closely with Anthony's team, whoever the member of the team is, and are making appropriate steps to manage what is a very, very increasingly difficult situation for schools. When it comes to you haven't mentioned secondaries, mentioned slightly in the report about we still, our schools have been particularly robust in actually delivering that curriculum for Key Stage 4, but we are having conversations with the college now. As you're aware, in 2027 there will be a raft of vocational GCSEs coming in, our schools will not be able to offer the range of that. So how do we offer those as a council, as a, as the 4 schools plus the college, to actually, so our young people have the range of opportunities that they can. And that's where we are at the moment with the secondary schools, is actually looking at, okay, we've always been able to deliver this subject up until now. We're really struggling moving forward. I've got children in Cyfarthfa that might want to take something that's only delivered in Penydre. How can we actually look at that? And that's a timetabling nightmare. So which is why for 2027, we've already started the conversations now to see, right, what can we put in for 2027?
Thank you, that's interesting. For the record, can I just note that Anthony was with us in primary school last week then, and was very helpful then in discussions then over the budget. And there was no pressure from us then to try and lose teaching staff then, because it was acknowledged that there is this balance between, as Councillor Lewis has said then, what we all want to do, which is provide the best education for our children, whilst at the same time dealing with the thorny issue of trying to balance the budget. Thank you.
I'm not sure if members are aware that actually Estyn and Audit Wales are doing a joint thematic review. I don't know when it's going to be published, but the work around it is going to be done in the autumn term. They are looking at the management of support for schools' budgets. So that report will be out sometime next year.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, as Jeff said, that would be interesting. I wasn't aware of it. Thank you all.
Right, Natalie.
It's quite a dismal picture across the board in Merthyr, and again, as Paul's just said, now the total loss of 149 staff is obviously very dismal. It's really saddening and disheartening. But the thing is, it's not actually removing waste from schools. This is losing valuable and much needed staff, when our staff are our most valuable resource. So we are getting rid of the best parts of our schools by reducing our staff numbers. The report says how the impacts are yet to be evaluated, but you'll already have an idea of what those are. So I don't mind who answers, but what are the anecdotal things that schools are raising so far that they're experiencing in relation to their budget cuts?
Yes, there's a number of areas, Natalie. In terms of some parts covered in the report, in terms of schools are looking at reduced class size or increased class sizes, reduced number of classes, reduced then staff and interventions for pupils who have additional learning needs. It's also impacting upon the additional curriculum, particularly in secondary schools, where they're looking for that alternative curriculum offer for those who aren't able to take the normal academic diet. It's affecting schools' abilities to be able to cover staff sickness absence, and they're having to look at opportunities to cover more and more sickness internally, where they can provide value for money from doing so, affecting capitation levels in terms of resources within schools. It's affecting SLA purchases, whether that's for the music service, just looking at that wider, broader curriculum offer that the children are receiving. Also the welfare service, there's been a reduction in the SLA for that, which obviously is needed for the most vulnerable families, and schools looking creatively how they can use existing staff to provide some of that resource themselves. There's a whole host of impacts really. I think that's why we've said within the report that the full impacts have yet to be evaluated, because schools are still trying to set that sustainable budget over the medium term. They're retaining staff for as long as they can because they value the work that staff are providing, and then obviously staff are having to be removed where it's necessary in order to balance that budget over the medium term. So it's very, very challenging. I think what is needed is a period of stability with regards to funding levels that schools receive that would help us to be able to evaluate what that impact is when schools have been able to accommodate the cuts that already have been applied and which they're still coming to terms with over the previous 2 financial years. So
what's been done to mitigate it? Because I know you're not going to be waiting for an effective evaluation. You can see what's happening. So what, if anything, is being done to mitigate that so far?
I think, as Sue said, opportunities are being considered in terms of the curriculum offered in secondary schools and how that can be provided on a collaborative model, so that schools are able to continue to provide a wider curriculum, albeit it'll be done in a different way. With regards to additional support funding, we've looked at how we allocate that funding to schools. This year, unfortunately, we weren't able to get that funding to schools as early as we wanted to. It was provided to them, as it has been every year for the last few years, by the end of May. That's led to some of the changes that we've discussed prior to the meeting. But with a new model that's been approved, that will provide schools with more cost certainty with regards to the funding levels they receive, and a bit more flexibility. So it's hoped that that's going to help schools to meet needs. So it's a way we're aware of things are being looked at to mitigate. I'm not sure if Sue wants to add anything in terms of music service or.
We've tried to utilise grants as much as grants as much as we can. A lot, we've made sure that as much as that comes out to schools as possible. For central staff, we've used the grants to try and keep our central staff and to keep the music service going. Because I don't know if any of you were at the recent concert in the Mormon Church. I know Hale Gerrig were there actually, but it was a fabulous event, actually showing the impact of music service on the schools. So we utilise like that, and likewise we as much as we can under the terms of the grant, utilising ALN to ensure we've got central staff to support the schools as well. So we're doing as much as we can to mitigate the impact, but where there's no money, it's very difficult.
Yeah. Thank you. That was the one part I wanted to ask about. The other part then is 6.17, mentions the impact of schools' ability to meet the RAS strategy, which, as we know, is success for every child. So given the expectation versus reality, which groups of children are and will be hit the hardest with the budgets?
I think it would vary from school to school. I think it's fair to say it depends how schools are actually managing that. All our head teachers and all our schools are doing the very, very best for all our children. And I think the issue is what we possibly can't tell is because the schools are doing such a good job, we don't know how well they would have done with more appropriate staffing levels, because our head teachers and our schools do, and our central teams as well, work their socks off to make sure that those children and young people have the best possible experiences they can. The offers that the support that the community focused team, the schools team put in for our very vulnerable families and learners within schools supports a lot of this. So I think it's probably difficult because there isn't a sort of a trial group, is there? You can't say, well, that school's had the additional funding and this is how they're doing, because this is across the board.
Yeah.
So I think it's very difficult to actually.
Yeah. Thank you for acknowledging how hard the schools are working, because they really, really are, and I feel for them with the pressures. And like I said, staff are our most valuable resource, and we're losing them, and it's having a massive impact. So thank you.
Lawrence?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I'll pick up on a couple of questions then. Relating to what we need to do next, can you elaborate what is meant by the comment in 8.6, where it says an approach is set in the school's formula funding in 26-27? A new approach or another approach? Can you explain what that means?
Yes, certainly. Thanks, Lawrence. So that is about the budget setting for 26-27, and asking that when members are set in the council's budget for 26-27, consideration is given to the information within this report and schools' financial position when deciding on those funding levels for schools and what they receive in their formula funding for that year.
I see. The council. Thank you. Can you suggest reasons as to why, looking at the table of schools, the first budget of the vast majority, if not all the schools, is so very different from the actual outturn figures that is achieved.
Referring to the figures in the appendix, or?
No, yes, in the appendix. So if you look at the outturn figures, then if you look at the first budget that people actually put forward at the beginning of the year, there's a huge difference between that projection versus what they actually achieved at the end.
In terms of the information in the appendix, so the first financial figure there, which is the outturn column.
Yep. If you look at the
that's
sheet,
part of the 24-25 financial year, so that is the year-end position.
Yeah. If you look at sheet 2, it gives you the first budget figures. So you look at first budget figures that people set in the budget setting processes. I know it changed through the year, but there's a massive difference between what they thought they were going to spend versus what they did spend at the year. I just wondered, and it's all the schools, some are obviously less, some are significant.
There are changes, and I think it's normal that there will be changes between the first budget that is set and the year-end position, and that's something that we experience every year really within the council and school, and councils across Wales experience it as well. But within the information in the report, apologies Lawrence, I can't see the information.
Second sheet.
In the report.
I know it's not there. You compare the two if you...
Yeah, but that's a different financial period. So the first budget within the appendix is the budget for the current financial year.
Yes.
The outturn.
Oh, no.
The outturn is the year-end position for the previous financial year. So they are different reporting periods. So you'd expect those figures to be different.
No. I'm sure that if you look at it, I can't get in front of me, perhaps I might be able to, bear with me. I'll come back to you if you want to pass on, okay? Thank you, Chair.
Yes. If we go to Hannah next then, and we can come back to that if...
Thanks, Clive. Going on to 5.10, there's a highlight that states that one of the schools may be in a compulsory redundancy situation. Has this been resolved now?
It hasn't yet.
Okay.
That is currently being worked through. They've gone through the voluntary redundancy processes. Some significant savings have been identified through that. So we are due to meet with the school this week to discuss that further, to consider next steps as to whether or not this compulsory process is needed right now.
Okay.
So that's still to be...
And then obviously if people were made compulsory redundant, it would be the end of the Christmas term, because obviously the times of years to put in place.
Yeah, if it was affecting teaching staff, we'd have to abide by the relevant notice periods, yes.
Okay, thank you. Also as well, I note the report I think was written on the 4th of June, or published I should say, but Welsh Government announced on the 10th of June there was a pay increase for teaching staff of 4%. Now they're saying it's fully funded, but we're hearing reports across Wales that it's not fully funded, and I'm just wondering, have you budgeted that 4% into teacher costs?
We budgeted 3% into for teacher costs, Hannah. We're waiting for Welsh Government for the additional 1%. That's what we're looking for, and that's the message that we've sent back. I've certainly had questions raised by UWE Union.
Yeah.
And that's what I've actually sent back. That we've budgeted for 3%. We won't be able to match.
So what does the 1% look like for you, and how will it impact further if Welsh Government don't come good with providing the additional?
It would be a cut to schools.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Sue.
Did you have any other question? No. It's just Jeff now then.
Could we go to 611? It says that reductions in school budgets have also impacted central services. And obviously, the council rely on schools having SLAs to assist down the line. But could you give us some idea how this has impacted the LA, and how this is then reverse impacted back onto schools, so it goes back into a cycle.
If you look at 6.12 and 6.13, that's where the most of them have. As we said, the music service, and we've got the education welfare service and buying. So that's where we've seen the most. We haven't seen it with other central services, but I would put a FISO as yet on that.
Right, sorry, so my hearing must be going duff.
Sorry.
But
So central services, the impact has been on the education central services. So it's the music service, as we've said in 6.12. Several schools have chosen to withdraw. So we had lost 4 posts last year, and we got a further 21% this year. And then we have, with some of the music service, we've been able to use the National Music Service grant to still offer something, but it's not as much as we were able to offer previously. And there's been an impact on the education welfare service buy-in. The moment I believe we're covering a lot of that, and from grants, I think we're able to cover it, but there are concerns about how we'd be able to manage that if there's more reduction moving forward.
Fine, thank you, Chair. I understand that. I was, and thank you for the answer to that, but I was thinking more of the SLAs that regularly or are required of schools. So there's a legal SLA, so there's the accounting.
As yet, we haven't seen an impact of that. That's what I'm saying, as yet.
There's been no impact as yet?
No impact issues on those as yet.
Is it imagined or is it planned for that there will be an impact on that?
That's where we look at the SLA evaluations that come through, and that's why we do that. So much work on that in the school's budget form. I couldn't answer that, Jeff. In actual fact, the governors that are sitting here are probably better placed to know that, because you'll be having those discussions with your schools as to, right, you know, what service level agreements can we afford to buy in, or can we not afford? Not that's my grammar's going to go wrong. Can we afford? Can we release then? Which ones have we got to have? Because they're going to protect us. Because a lot of the service level agreements protect schools and give you the additional support that you need. But could you would be better placed to know what conversations are being had in your own governing bodies.
Yeah. So the point of asking this question, Chair, was quite simple. That, you know, sooner or later, schools are going to have to come back to, usually Anthony, but you guys, yeah, and say, look, you know, we can't lose another teacher, we can't lose this, we're down to the bare bones, we're going to have to go on the SLAs. And the first one out the door is whatever that might be, and the next one out the door, and eventually that's going to come back and bite you guys really hard. Now, you guys on education? No, not necessarily, but you guys as the senior leadership team of the council, yes, it's going to affect you. And so everything you do to the schools, yeah, if we have to cut and cut and cut and cut, eventually it's going to come back and cut with you. Yeah, and I don't think that eventually is that far off. Certainly in my experience from some of the schools that, you know, I know about. Yeah, so I do think there needs to be a root and branch overhaul of that, which we do, how we go about it. It needs some group of us, yeah, to sit down together with officers, whoever, and see if we can think of an alternative solution to bring this LA back into where it needs to be, especially for the education of our children. I'm not saying anybody's doing anything wrong, but it never hurts to have another look at it from with a different pair of eyes.
They are constantly reviewing it, really.
I think in terms of SLAs, are you referring just to SLAs or more broadly in terms of a review?
Sorry, Anthony, I didn't hear that. I apologise.
Are you referring to SLAs when you speak of a review, or are you referring to something more broad?
I'm talking generic. So, you know, you're aware more than anybody else that, you know what's in the budget of each school. You know what's available. Hannah's just presented a point where she said the Welsh Government agreed to do X, and in fact it's X minus 1% or whatever it is. Yeah, that affects the schools. There's outside things that affect the schools. There's internal things. Eventually, yeah, we have to come to the SLAs, or we will do. Look, Paul's Chair of Finance, he knows what's happening. I know what's happening. We all do. Yeah, the truth of the matter is that sooner or later it's going to come down and bite everybody. So we really do have to get, in my opinion, yeah, I'd like to know what your opinion is where we go from here. Do we have a root and branch evaluation? What do we do? Because we can't sit in here. This is, to my knowledge, perhaps the 3rd or 4th year we've been discussing this. Yeah, and each year it's getting worse and worse, despite the fact that everybody tries hard. Yeah, and it looks like the projections are that it's going to get even worse. So we have to do something.
SLAs are a difficult one, aren't they? Because for the majority of the SLAs, there's little choice in reality for the governing body, because they have to have that service, and there's not necessarily a market that they can easily access to provide an alternative. So, and I think there's been consideration to that within the Welsh Government. They're reviewing schools funding across Wales in terms of how this is set up and structured, the areas of expenditure that are delegated to schools, and the areas of expenditure that are retained within local authorities. So I think there's potentially scope for there to be a review of the SLAs within the local authority in terms of what we delegate to schools. Is that meaningful delegation? Is that something where schools are able to get value for money and have real choice in terms of what they receive? Are there SLAs we delegate which would be more appropriate to hold at the centre? I think it's worth having that dialogue and consider what comes out of that. It does go back to a point, I think, which Simone raised in the budget forum. I think it was back in March when we were discussing the additional support funding model, and Simone asked the question about would this affect the level of cuts applied to schools in the following year, i.e. could ALM be considered funding that you don't cut? And obviously the position was advised that that wouldn't be the case. But SLAs is another example of that, whereby the funding is allocated, but there's not a lot of choice for schools within that. So the percentage of budget reduction to schools in terms of what they can choose to spend money on is actually higher than what we're reporting, because we report against the bottom line and against the total funding, which would include SLAs. So I think that there is scope for there to be a consideration of SLAs, a meaningful delegation of SLAs. Yeah. So that would potentially give the context, the truer context to the budget reductions the schools are having to find at the moment.
Thank you for that, Chair.
So if Paul goes next, then, unless there's anything pressing after Natalie, we'll sort of close this item then. Perhaps we're having a good discussion. But if there's anything pressing further, that'll be okay. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Again, if I can go to Sue. I'm surprised that we haven't asked yet what happens in the near future. I'm conscious of the fact that the Central South Consortium is changing the way it operates, and the local authority then has to pick up responsibilities for much of the improvement work. Can I just have confirmation that for this year at least there's no changes planned for our budgets within schools, because any changes then resulting in the additional staff that might be needed, for example, then within a local authority, if that's what happens, then will come out of the central budget rather than from clawback from schools, please?
Yes, it would come out of our core budget.
Thank you.
Natalie?
Thank you. Anthony, you said about ALN budgets not being cut, which I'm really pleased to hear. But ALN is taking more and more of our budget. So is there an ALN action plan or something in place to how we're going to address the ever-increasing number of children that need ALN support? And I say that as a parent, that I'm neurodivergent myself. So I want to know that my children and any other children are going to have full support when it comes to ALN.
In terms of the the budget cut. Apologies, Natalie. I think I may have misspoke or been misunderstood.
Okay.
Simone asked that question within the budget forum.
Right.
As to whether ALN could be protected from budget cuts.
Yeah.
But she was told that that wouldn't be the case. ALN wouldn't be protected from budget cuts. Obviously, the budget cuts themselves have still to be determined in terms of what that looks like for the next financial year. But there's been no guarantees of there being protection for ALN funding not being cut. Apologies. In terms of the wider question.
Okay, so there's no guarantees, and also we don't know if there's going to be any sort of chance for increased budget either then, I suppose, with ALN. I know it isn't, but it needs to be asked because it is, I mean, it just affects so many things with well-being, attendance, and ultimately the most important is our children. You know, any child that needs extra support, and I know schools are struggling already to meet those needs. So
I think the one benefit, or one of the benefits of the new model we're working to on ALN funding, the delegated model, is that it is considerate to demand in the system. So if the demands are there, there will be additional funding provided to schools. That will be part of the school's formula funding. But what it doesn't speak to is the wider strategic question about funding cuts across the council and where they would fall, and whether or not the ALN elements of that would then be protected. So
and
there's been no guarantees about that.
And that would be based on demand from the school rather than, say, parents. Because if you look at the demand from school, you may have X number, but if you look at the demand from parents or what parents perceive, you could have double numbers.
Yeah, it'd be demand from the school.
Yeah.
So, Lawrence?
Yeah, I just want to check, Chair, are you accepting comments?
Oh, yes, we go to comments now then, yeah.
Is that okay? No? I want to ask a question here first.
Oh.
Anna?
Anna, you got a question?
Yes, I have. Just going back to ALN, because it does worry me massively. How many children across the authority have an ALN need or are waiting on a referral and an assessment for within the neuro team? Because I'm concerned we've got a significant amount of redundancies. You've already said there's going to be cuts to sort of subject areas where there's qualifications for our lower ability children. Most of them usually have ALN needs. So I'd like to see the impact. I don't expect the data now, but I think we need to come back to this because they're going to be our hardest hit children.
We'll get that, Johanna.
Thank you, Sue.
Oh, we go to comments, and if there's no more questions, is there? Lawrence?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a comment. I understand this report is primarily financially based, but the context in which these budgets are assessed is extremely important. The statements contained in the So What section clearly highlights the impact on staff, resources, and hence the growing incapacity to give the children in our care the best opportunity to achieve their potential. The fact that 149 people to date have lost their jobs and the expectation of significant numbers still to come is a chilling one. This report does not offer any strategic options to mitigate the budget cuts, except for the comments made in 86 and 87. It was expected that the removal of the middle tier consortium would release additional funds for schools. This doesn't seem to have materialised. However, at the beginning of the next academic year, the removal of the consortium role in the school improvement and some professional learning has passed the responsibility to the local authority and schools. Whilst I believe the continual drive for collaborative working between schools is a good thing, I cannot see how this will work in practice when senior staff are having to manage schools with reduced staffing levels and no money to release people to attend collaborative activities. Priority must be given to release individuals with professional learning opportunities besides the other expectations. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments? No other comments. We've certainly asked a lot of questions of the Education Department. Essentially, what we have to ask is, did the committee address the recommendations in the report, and how did scrutiny add value? Do you think we added value So we certainly made a lot of comments and a lot of questions. Sorry, Paul.
That's very subjective, Clive. I mean, I don't know. I'm conscious of the fact that when we are here, that we are being recorded, and that the taxpayers, like myself and others then of this town, someone like myself who's a parent governor who's got a child in school, are all considering then whether or not we are actually asking the right questions. When we ask the questions, myself especially, I'm thinking of not just myself, but then others as well. So you can't expect us to answer whether or not we were good today, whether we asked all the right questions. I can't think of any more questions that needed to be asked, but there again, there'll be other people outside of this committee who possibly might. So it's impossible for us to be able to answer. Only time will tell whether or not we ask sufficient questions. I'm sure that Councillor Lewis has taken note of all that's been said, and I know that he understands then the concerns then from all parents, all taxpayers, all governors of this area, and all staff who work so hard then to try and deliver education. But we're all concerned about the budget position. I acknowledge the fact that we're in an invidious position where the money is granted then from central government down to Welsh Government and from Welsh Government down. But the reasons for some of the questions, such as trying to seek answers on who has the least deficit then amongst their schools, is to open up then to the political awareness, people who might not understand that it's going to be a political decision at the end of the day in terms of how we share out the money then that's granted to us then from Welsh Government. And I don't I don't think that that's going to be an easy decision then in terms of how you divvy it out when you've got then money that's needed in social services and other essential services that the council does provide. Sorry.
Has anyone got any other comments to make? No. Well, thanks for that. We certainly had a good discussion. So the next item on the agenda is agenda item 4, museum accreditation. Gareth Lewis, the Cabinet member, will outline this report.
Yeah, thank you once again, Chair. This report considers the progress made towards re-accreditation of Merthyr Tydfil's museum services over the last 12 months, following the return of museum services to the local authority back in May 2024. Museum standards in England and Wales is underpinned by museum accreditation and is designed to support and help museums to track a range of their works. And the system to assess is shown in 5.1 of the report. The museum is now provisionally accredited, and to return to full accreditation, a panel through Welsh Government has requested the service to submit updated policies, plans, security reviews and a 2-year forward plan by mid-September of this year. The report also outlines events to mark the bicentenary of Cyfarthfa Castle. The event so far has been really well received, and the report also details current building and operational issues. Visitor numbers are increasing year on year, and digital engagement through social media has increased alongside a new website. And indeed, this weekend will mark a number of celebratory events at the castle to mark its birthday. A range of plans for the future of the service is outlined in section 7.0, and this includes new grant funding applications, a Laura Ashley event in September, and plans on developing Cyfarthfa as a Christmas destination. I'd like to thank Kelly and Zoe for the progress your team has made so far and all your hard work since the museum service returned to the local authority. I wish you all the best in gaining full accreditation and indeed for the remaining events for the bicentenary. Thanks.
So, have we got any questions on the report? We've got Kelly Powell and Zoe Driscoll here to answer all the difficult questions.
Yes, please. Just a very basic question. The report's well written. Thank you very much for that. But it would be helpful if we had some kind of financial implications from grants, etc., just so we knew where everything was going. The report is complete as in it says, but without a financial part, it isn't really as complete as perhaps it could be. Now, I accept totally that you get money from grants, etc. We just need to see how they're being spent, whether we could make suggestions that they're spent in a different way, whatever. It's just so that we have a complete report. That's all.
I come in there, Jeff?
Yeah.
Because the purpose of this report was to consider the accreditation process. So that's my fault, because Kelly we would have been able to give you a complete breakdown of that. But I gave Kelly the information on what to put in the report, which was related to what we've been doing and actually the progress towards the accreditation, which doesn't include what you've just been asking for. So I'll take that. That's not Kelly and Zoe. I hadn't asked them to include that information. They'd be more than able to do that, but I hadn't asked for it to be included. So apologies, Jeff.
Yeah, apologies accepted. You just know what an awkward load of people we are down here.
I should have realised, shouldn't I?
But we always ask for finances just so we can really go to town on it. Thank you very much.
We can certainly provide that for you.
That would be helpful if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No. Lawrence?
Thank you, Chair. Just taking the opportunity to pick up what Jeff said. As this service falls under the Education Directorate now, how is it actually financed? Is there any implications on the education budget?
Museums and the libraries have a separate core budget.
I see. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Natalie?
Thank you. In the email that I sent prior to the meeting about the draft forward work plan, I did mention Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan and also diversity training as well, a diversity anti-racist professional learning. I'd just like to acknowledge the project about Anti-Racist Wales project with Welsh Government. I think that's fantastic to see that in there with regard to identifying colonial items within the Cyfarthfa collection and how you're going to address those histories. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about that project, please?
The best person to answer this is actually in Hawaii right now.
Oh,
yeah, so Charlotte Barry, our Education and Interpretation Officer, has actually spoken at the last Museums Association conference in Leeds. But together with Zoe and myself overarching, she's worked very closely with the Welsh Indian group from Cardiff, since identifying a lot of our collection is related to Indian objects that were collected and donated in the 1920s. We didn't have a collections policy at the time that was centred purely on items from Merthyr Tydfil. Yes. But then that it is a very rich collection because of that and how we're able to work on such projects. But we do have a permanent exhibition now in one of the galleries that went up, I think it was in the last few months, is it so? Yeah. Because we feel that is something that we need to address rather than just sort of do an event and just, we've done several events with the Indian group, but we haven't, we didn't want to just do that and then move on. It is something that we're continuing doing. And as far as I know, there are more plans to try and work with more diverse groups. I don't know if Zoe wants to come in on this.
Yeah, we've got like this year we held like a sort of a cultural day, an Indian cultural day, and invited the public to come in, and we do have plans to kind of do more of that. And it's I think it's Anti-Racist
Wales Action Plan, yeah.
No, but it's Black History Month in October, yeah. I think.
That's right.
So we're working with the community cohesion team to try and do an event for that as well to mark that.
Yeah, lovely, thank you.
Can I come in there? Not this isn't related to the museum, but Lawrence will be aware of this event. The Avon feeder schools did a big event on diversity. They had a grant from the community cohesion team, and the celebration event was in leisure centre a couple of weeks ago. But it was actually run. The workshops were run by parents from Dowlais Community School, from different cultures that are prevalent in Merthyr. I had the privilege of actually going down and seeing the celebration of Lawrence. It was a fabulous event, but that's been really successful. But a lot of those groups of children would have been to the museum and seen that. But I thought it was worth actually sort of pointing that out as well.
Thank you for that. It's very important. We haven't really. How can I put this? I suppose some of our schools don't have many children of global majority backgrounds. So I think the fact that we are doing that work within the borough, I think is a really good sort of stepping stone or a point to move forward across the borough as well. 'Cause I think some schools don't have that rich diversity. So yeah, it'd be good to share it with other schools. Thank you.
Thank you. It's not a question, actually, because your report was very comprehensive, so thank you for that. And you've endured us going through the questions through on education earlier, and you must be thinking what's coming your way. I have no questions. I am pedantic. Could I just point out on page 36 then, I didn't know until you two spoke who was the cabinet member that was responsible and who was the officer that was responsible, because they left blank. So as this is a matter of public record, would somebody like to fill in the details, please? But thank you, and well done, folks.
Well, as it's come in here, it's Gareth and myself. Sorry, Paul.
No problem.
Proof. Hannah?
I'm just reading a part where it says about the 2025 exhibition programme. Could you share a little bit more with us? I'm an art teacher, so actually coming into museums and see the work is really beneficial to all sort of age groups, and particularly GCSE students, as there's a change to the specification where they're looking at more Welsh artists and more cultural diverse artists as well. So I'm keen to know what you're doing, because not just sort of schools in Merthyr, but schools in the neighbouring boroughs as well would love to come and see the exhibitions as well. So it's an opportunity to showcase what's going on, I suppose.
So this year we're focusing on the bicentenary, and we've been working with artists as well as community groups. The first exhibition we had on from January, I think it was to the end of April, was one that we created with community groups and schools in the borough, with their response to what the bicentenary of the castle meant to them, and we displayed a lot of the work that they came up with. The one that's on now, that actually I think it was launched about end of May, is called Juxtaposed, which was an open call to all artists, not just in Merthyr Tydfil, from all over really. We've had 76 pieces of work on display in response to our collections. So juxtaposed as in they've looked at the paintings or the photographs or the watercolours, prints in our collection, and then come up with their own response. And then there's been prize winners there for each category, with the prize money being from the Cyfarthfa Foundation, which is one of our stakeholders. We've then had events where actually just Saturday just gone, the printmaker that came first, he was able to run a workshop then. Everyone had the opportunity to book on, and we hope to do more of those. The last exhibition this year will be from, I think it's the end of September to the end of the year, and it's called Know Your Place. And we've obtained Arts Council Wales funding to support the work of two artists living and working in not just Merthyr Tydfil, but in the valleys, who are going to look at the role of women and workers who are not as represented in our collections, as obviously you'll see a lot of paintings of Victorian men in dark suits, you know. Yep. So it's playing on that, and we're also able to loan I don't know if you know the workers' portraits, which are the Chapmans, which are actually from the National Museum of Wales. They're usually on permanent display there, and they're quite rare portraits. But as for working with schools more widely, we do work quite closely with the college from the Art College. We do try to, we have a session called Art in a Box that we take out to schools, showcasing some of the paintings in our collections, and ask students to curate on different walls, mobile walls, what they think. We had a recent session with, not in Merthyr, but it was a school in Llangattock whose headmistress is actually from Merthyr Tydfil, which is why I think we got chosen. It was called Superpower of Looking. It was funded by Art Fund. We took a painting out to them. Obviously, we had to have funding for the transport. And it was actually a painting in our collection called On Strike. And I don't know if you know Llangattock, but it's a lovely little village, very different to what was portrayed in these paintings of terraced houses, very gloomy painting, obviously referring to the miners on strike. And I actually went along, I was able to actually get out that day, and spent time with our education officer and an artist that we've worked with called Kira Moran, who's actually employed by education, and she's an artist in her own right. And she actually worked with years 1 and 2, 3 and 4, all the way through this school, touching on different nuances of the paintings, to get them to really forensically look at these paintings, to understand what they're looking at. And so we hope to do more of that, but obviously it's funding dependent. But we do quite a lot of outreach. We have loans boxes that go out to the schools. Zoe then is the community officer. She works quite closely with community groups as well as our education. You did a session last week, didn't you?
In Gethley Dig Youth
So if you want to...
Yeah, oh, sorry. In Gethley Dig Youth Club we went last week. So we've started now to work with the community groups for Know Your Place. And we took sort of replicas of the paintings with us and kind of spoke to the children there about women and how they're represented, just so that information can feed into the exhibition then that will start in September.
It's an interesting topic because looking at women and work, it also then challenges the topics of misogyny and things like that when it comes to school. So it's a really powerful topic. So thank you for sharing that information.
Thanks. I was going to ask, when Joseph Parry's cottage is open, do you have a staff member there at all, guarding it, sort of? There was a comment in the two, you were waiting for BT to put in cable, fibre optic, or fibre Wi-Fi. What was all that about?
So basically, obviously we came back last year and we're now able to be fully staffed again, and the intention was to reopen Joseph Parry's from April, twice a week, as well as the events that Zoe does on other days, like Saturdays, and also Joseph Parry's birthday, which I think fell on a Wednesday this year, and Christmas and Halloween events. But we had literally, the week we were due to open, we had the theft of the candelabra from the museum. We also discovered that we didn't have a working phone line down in Joseph Parry's, and we thought, okay, it's okay, we've got mobile phones. The walls are that thick, you can't get a signal. It's the same as in the castle, I know. So we've been working with IT and Comtech to try and get these cables in. It's a listed building as well, so we've had those hurdles. You can't just drill a hole in the wall and put a router on. And yeah, it's been incredibly frustrating because we don't want anyone lone working down there, because they feel, rightly so, since what happened in the castle in broad daylight, vulnerable. We don't have Wi-Fi down there, so it's not a case of one of us going down there with our laptop and sitting next to them while they deal with the public. It's a very difficult building. I am looking at a funding application I'm putting into Welsh Government in the next few months to get a lot of capital money to safeguard the future of Joseph Parry's, but actually bring it up to 21st century. Even put in central heating down there so we can open it more all year round, because it's incredibly cold in there in the winter. So we don't do as many events. But yeah, it's been a big bugbear of mine over the last few months, and we're really hoping we're open by the school holidays, because we've actually got somebody coming out on Wednesday now they've had to order the parts, and fingers crossed, we will be open in the next week or two. So
you'll have a lone worker there then,
yes.
but with a phone line.
Yeah, with a phone line. We're also going to be able to put some temporary Wi-Fi in there. It costs thousands of pounds to get the council system Wi-Fi there, but you can just use like this sort of routers we have in houses. So yeah, we're hoping in the next few weeks it will be open more often, other than just for events.
Thanks for that.
Okay.
Thanks. Are there any more questions about the museum? No. Are there any comments? Oh, Hannah, Natalie, I mean, sorry.
Thank you for the lovely reports. Really appreciate it.
Are there any more comments? No. No. Oh well, thanks for that. Then it was quite interesting, really. The museum's still very popular up there. No, I go up there sometimes. Yeah, yeah. The question we have to ask is: did we address the recommendations in the report, and how did scrutiny add value? That's a difficult one. That is really, isn't it? Has anyone got any comments on that, Natalie?
It's so evident in those reports. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yes. Oh well, thanks very much, both of you. If you can stop if you like, or make your way now. Well, the next item on the agenda is scrutiny referrals, and there haven't been any referrals since the last meeting. And item 7, feedback on scrutiny activities, any outstanding actions. Whereas, just to remind everyone, you should have had an email that the risk workshop is the 22nd of September. But the last item on the agenda, any other business? I've not got anything. Paul?
Yes, if we can go back to that last item then about referrals. Natalie has given a number of referrals by email which needs to be recorded.
Oh, yes, sorry, I forgot about that.
We discussed that earlier, didn't we? So for completeness, those are the suggestions that we've come up with as a group that we would support. Thank you very much.
Right, yeah, Lawrence?
Could I ask, Chair, regarding the risk workshop, who will be in attendance at that workshop?
Andrew Mogford, the Policy and Performance Manager, is leading the workshop. Director would be the scrutiny members, Cabinet member.
Right, okay.
And it's to look specifically at the Education Service Risk Register.
I see, thank you.
Oh, Natalie?
Will we be sent information in advance of the workshop? Because I know when we've had previous workshops, we haven't had anything in advance. We turn up at the session and then there's a presentation, like a slideshow, a PowerPoint or something. Not a slideshow, but a PowerPoint. But yeah, will we be sent anything in advance of that so we can actually digest the information before the workshop? Do you know?
I'm not aware of anything being sent out beforehand, but I'll check and I'll email.
Yeah, if you could do, especially for me with the ADHD, I'd rather process it in advance than sort of on the spot and then think of things after the workshop, if possible, please. Thank you.
I think that's true of many of us, if not
Yeah.
all of us.
Yes, it's a good point, that. Sure. Oh, Lawrence?
Yes, sorry, Chair. Just to pick up, I should have come back to them. When you said, sorry, Jim, when you said we're looking at the education risk register at the workshop, will we be able to, is it just those topics on the register, or are there other topics that we'll be able to discuss regarding the forward work plan?
both, I think, because the risk workshop is so that we can identify topics that you want to call to the forward work programme.
Yeah, because the expectation from the conversation earlier was that we would be able to have an opportunity to adjust the programme as to the topics that we feel is appropriate.
Yeah, we'll be able to do that at that workshop.
Okay,
I
thanks.
think it's impossible to stop us from contributing and putting forward those risks.
Perhaps we should propose to have sandwiches and all that for us as well. I bet. No, we haven't got any money. So if there's nothing else, has anyone got anything further? No. Oh, well, we'll close the meeting there then. Thanks for your all attendance. It's only about one day a year we get weather like this year, isn't it?